Welcome back to my channel, friends. Today, I will be making the distinction between mind and intellect and how do these two different mental faculties help us to attain the best version of ourselves in our path of self-improvement and attainment of moksha, liberation, nirvana, siddhi, samadhi, whatever you want to call your spiritual journey towards attainment of Brahman. So, first we have to understand what are the different components of mental faculties. So basically they can be grouped into four compartments as I have discussed in my prior lectures. The four compartments are manas, or the active thinking brain, which is determined by the neocortex, the chitta, which is the repository of all the thoughts that have ever occurred in our life, in our lifetime and in our past lives, that are all lying repressed in the subconscious brain, and a lot of those impulses come back as reflex activities, anger, rage, resentment that we don't have a lot of control upon. So those are in the subconscious, hippocampus, amygdala, that's the chitta. The third one is ahankara, or the ego, which beautifully manifests as claims of proprietorship over any activity that is successfully accomplished. That is just a sense of fulfillment that is arising from sensual gratification as well. And the fourth is the Buddhi, or the delineating intellect, the rational reasoning brain, which will determine which thoughts to be acted upon and which thoughts need to be repressed. Beautifully related to the thalamus, or the relay center of the brain. So those four are the basic compartments of the mental faculties: manas, active thinking; chitta, passive thinking; buddhi, delineating intellect; and ahankara, or ego, which is giving you claims of proprietorship and ownership and doership. So today we are going to talk about mind as it entails the components of manas and chitta combined together as man, or the thinking process, versus the action pathway of delineating intellect, or buddhi. So man versus buddhi, the thought process versus rationalization mind. So what the Bhagavad Gita will tell us is that the thoughts are very random and sometimes they can become repetitive. But for the most part, they will be jumping from one portion to another. And Arjun very beautifully says that in Bhagavad Gita, Arjun, the disciple warrior, when he's talking to Lord Krishna, or the embodiment of Brahman, that the mind is so turbulent. It's like a gust of wind. It cannot be controlled or tamed. And this was his question, to which Krishna says that you have to control it with abhyasa and sannyasa. Abhyasa, perseverance and practice, and sannyasa, detachment or dispassionate attachment. Remove the passion and be attached to your activity. So those are the ways to do it, but it's kind of very cumbersome to understand how can mind be our frenemy? How can it be a friend and an enemy? It depends on the thought process it's contemplating and ruminating upon. So, if you think about mind, as Lord Krishna says in one of the chapters, Bandhuratmanastasya yen atmaev atmana jata anatmanastu satrusve vartat atmaeva shatruvat, which means bandhu, friend. It's your best friend if it is under your control. It is your worst enemy, your worst nightmare, if it is controlling you and doing things which are going totally berserk and out of your control. So it is about controlling and taming the mind. Who tames the mind? Who will determine whether we are able to control certain thoughts, and more so not acting on those detrimental thoughts that are going to lead to not only crime but also spiritual devolution. That is determined by the potentiating capacitor, or the relay center of brain, that is called intellect, the delineating intellect, the rational brain that will determine what activities we should engage our senses and do actions versus what we should refrain and restrain. So that is what Buddhi comes into play. And very clearly in Bhagavad Gita, a hierarchy has been created between these mental faculties, where senses, by which I mean objects of our sense organs, which are looking for objects of sensual gratification, like a receptor wanting to bind onto a ligand. Those senses of objects of sensual gratification are all out in the nature, and the senses will try to recruit them to create a sense of pleasure through the neurotransmitter dopamine. So senses are lying at the base. Above the senses is the mind, the thinking mind. And above the mind is the intellect. You can call it the rationalizing mind, but basically it's the delineating intellect. And above this is sa. Sa denotes soul. So senses, mind, intellect, soul. They have different characteristics. The loudest is the weakest. So the senses are always hankering and craving and wanting stuff that we are depriving of them. And if you're giving it too much, then they want even more because they're not getting the same satiation effect. And that's why the senses are our enemy number one. Because senses are not friends. This has to be very clearly understood, that we have to use our senses only for performance of actions. And that's why it's one of the necessary evil or evil traits that the body has to engage in whenever the mind, or I should say the soul, embodies in the 5-element Panch Bhautik Sharir, 5-element body, fire, earth, air, water, ether, composed body. It has to reciprocate in the form of having senses to perceive those elements and also to create action. So that is why we need the senses to create action, and the action has to be in Sakam Karma, which is, Nishkam Karma, not Sakam Karma. Nishkam Karma is dispassionate attachment or detachment mode in which the activities have to be performed because they are the right things to be done. So senses are the bottommost part, and they create pleasure, not bliss. They create pleasure, which is transient happiness. And transient happiness does not lead to fulfillment. It leads to further craving and hankering. That's why senses are enemy number one. Next comes the controller of senses, which is the mind. The mind is a frenemy. It can be a friend or it can be enemy, as it is said in that shloka. So if you control it well, it becomes a friend. If you don't control it, becomes an enemy. That control is exercised by reasoning brain, the intellect. So that is why, in a way, Buddhi is the master of both the senses and the mind. The Buddhi is a good friend. And that is why it says to destroy the Buddhi, you need the force of ahankara or ego. When the ego deludes you, then the Buddhi is totally neutralized. And that is why the Buddhi is not going to tell you the right reasoning and rationalization for attainment of Nishkam Karma activities. Then you engage in activities which are addicting, obsessive, compulsive, creating transient pleasures by helping the senses come to fruition by combining with the objects of sensual gratification, but not creating Nishkam Karma, not creating Vairagya, not creating activities which are leading to growth of the soul, and instead they are causing growth of the body. So Buddhi is the ultimate thing, but Buddhi can even be destroyed by ahankara or ego. So it's very important to understand that ego or ahankara becomes the mastermind, and that's why when you want to control your right reasoning capacity of intellect, and if you want to control the mind thoughts, and if you want to control the senses pleasure activities, you have to kind of bounce back to ahankara and destroy the ahankara. And Krishna says this in a very beautiful verse itself in chapter 3, where it says Prakrite kriyamarani guna karmani sarvasha ahankar muratma kartaham iti manyate, which means the prakriti or the nature. The body is made up of 5 elements of nature. So the body does these activities by engaging the senses with objects of sensual gratification, and quickly the ego claims proprietorship that I did it, because sense of accomplishment is created, sense of gratification is created, and that is why it's very important to distinguish and decimate the arrogance the ego, the dhamb of I, because there is no I. This is just an embodiment, a temporary embodiment in which the Chetana or the consciousness is living to attain activities of karma in the manifest world. And if you want to make the most of it while temporarily you are getting to enjoy the senses, mind and buddhi, you have to tame them and align them in the right path in which they do Nishama Karma, which is activities without any entanglement, activities without any personal self-gratification, because those are temporary and not fulfilling. So, to sum it up, the senses create transient pleasure by dopamine neurotransmitter. They can be controlled by meditation and the right thoughts in the mind. The mind itself is controlled by the delineating capacitor called Buddhi, which will determine what mind thoughts should be acted upon to create karma and which one should be refrained from. But the Buddhi, which is a friend, mind could be a friend or enemy, the Buddhi, which is a friend, can sometimes get deluded by the overwhelming ahankara or arrogance, which is just causing destruction of the entire thought process and the mental faculties. So most important is to control the ahankara and say that I am not the doer, not to claim proprietorship or ownership over the activities performed, but to pray, meditate and be more humble, because itself in Gita it said Vidya Vinay Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hasini Shuni Chapsupake Pandita Samdarshina, which means Vidya and Vinay. Vidya comes from Buddhi or intellect, and Vinay is humbleness or humility. Those two are very dear to both the gods and the Paramatma, because that shows that you have the ability, but you are not taking claims of proprietorship while you are temporarily riding this body. So humility is created from destruction of arrogance, and vidya or knowledge is created from the buddhi or the delineating intellect, knowing what is right and what is wrong. So I hope you liked this video, my friends. If you have any comments, please leave it below. Thanks.